Hi, Aqua Roomers. Time for chapter reading. Well, we know that the family has moved into the home that Pa built. I'll show you a picture. So the walls are up. The roof is just a canvas cover for now. And there's no door. Have a blanket over the door and just window holes. But it's a fine home. And we started to read that the next thing Pa had to do was to make a stable for Pet and Patty. But first, he needed to help Mr. Edwards build his house. There was no stable door, but in the moonlight, Pa drove two stout posts well into the doorway. And he put Pet and Patty inside the stable, and then he laid small split logs, one above the other, across the door space. The posts held them, and they made a solid wall. "Now," Pa said, "let those wolves howl. I'll sleep tonight." In the morning, when he lifted the split logs from behind the posts, Laura was amazed. Beside Pet stood a long-legged, long-eared, wobbly little colt. When Laura ran toward it, gentle Pet laid back her ears and snapped her teeth at Laura. "Keep back, Laura," Pa said sharply. He said to Pet, "Now, Pet, you know we won't hurt your little colt." Pet answered him with a soft whinny. She would let Pa stroke her colt, but she would not let Laura or Mary come near it. Even when they peeked at it through the cracks in the stable wall, Pet rolled the whites of her eyes at them, and she showed them her teeth. They had never seen a colt with ears so long before. Pa said it was a little mule, but Laura said it looked like a jackrabbit. So they named the little colt Bunny. Isn't that a wonderful name? Yes. So there, let me see. Yes, I dropped my inside. There is a picture of Bunny. Oh my goodness. So look, Pa has built, there's the house, and there's the stable. Oh, but Laura and Mary are staying away. When Pet was on her picket line, with Bunny frisking around her and wondering at the big world, Laura must watch baby Carrie carefully. If anyone but Pa came near Bunny, Pet squealed with rage and dashed to bite that little girl. Early that Sunday afternoon, Pa rode Patty away across the prairie to see what he could see. There was plenty of meat in the house, so he did not take his gun. He rode away through the tall grass along the rim of the creek bluffs. Birds flew up before him and circled and sank into the grasses. Pa was looking down into the creek bottoms as he rode. Perhaps he was searching and watching for deer browsing there. And then Patty broke into a gallop, and swiftly she and Pa grew smaller. Soon there was only waving grass where they had been. Late that afternoon, Pa had not come home. Ma stirred the coals of the fire and laid chips on them and began to get supper. Mary was in the house minding the baby, and Laura asked Ma, "What's the matter with Jack?" Jack was walking up and down, looking worried. He wrinkled his nose in the wind, and the hair rose up on his neck, and he lay down, and then he rose up again. Pet's hooves suddenly thudded. She ran around the circle of picket rope and stood there, wickering a low wicker. Bunny came close to her. "What's the matter, Jack?" Ma asked. He looked at her, but he couldn't say anything. Ma gazed around the whole circle of earth and sky. She could not see anything unusual. Likely it isn't anything, Laura, she said. She raked coals around the coffee pot and the spider and onto the top of the bake oven. The prairie hen sizzled in the spider, and the corn cakes began to smell good. But all that time, Ma kept glancing at the prairie around. Jack walked about restlessly, and Pet did not graze. She faced the northwest, where Pa had gone, and kept her colt close beside her. All at once, Patty came running across the prairie. She was stretched out, running with all her might, and Pa was leaning almost flat on her neck. She ran right past the stable before Pa could stop her. He stopped her so hard that she almost sat down. She was trembling all over, and her black coat was streaked with sweat and foam. Pa swung off her. He was breathing hard, too. "What's the matter, Charles?" Ma asked him. Pa was looking toward the creek, so Ma and Laura looked at it too, but they could only see the space above the bottomlands, with a few treetops on it, and the distant tops of the earthen bluffs under the high prairie's grasses. "What is it?" Ma asked again. "Why did you ride Patty like that?" Pa breathed a long breath. "I was afraid the wolves would beat me here. But I see everything's all right." "Wolves!" she cried. "What wolves?" "Everything's all right, Caroline," said Pa. "Let a fella get his breath." When he got some breath, he said, "I didn't ride Patty like that. It was all I could do to hold her at all. 50 wolves, Caroline, the biggest wolves I ever saw. I wouldn't go through such a thing again, not for a mint of money." A shadow came over the prairie just then, because the sun had gone down, and Pa said, "I'll tell you all about it later." "We'll eat supper in the house," said Ma. "No need of that," he told her. "Jack will give us warning in plenty of time." He brought Pet and the colt from the picket line. He didn't take them and Patty to drink from the creek, as he usually did. He gave them the water in Ma's wash tub, which was standing full of clean water, ready for the washing the next morning. He rubbed down Patty's sweaty sides and legs and put her in the barn with Pet and Bunny. Supper was ready. The campfire made a circle of light in the dark. Laura and Mary stayed close to the fire and kept baby Carrie with them. They could feel the dark all around them, and they kept looking behind them at the place where the dark mixed with the edge of the firelight. Shadows moved there as if they were alive. Jack sat on his haunches beside Laura. The edges of his ears were lifted, listening to the dark. I have a picture. So they're having supper outside. So there's Laura. And can you tell that Jack is looking very carefully, keeping guard of things? And there's Mary. The edges of Jack's ears were lifted, listening to the dark. Now and then he walked a little way into it. He walked all around the campfire and came back to sit beside Laura. The hair lay flat on his thick neck, and he did not growl. His teeth showed a little, but that was because he was a bulldog. Laura and Mary ate their corn cakes and the prairie hen's drumsticks, and they listened to Pa while he told Ma about the wolves. He found some more neighbors. Settlers were coming in and settling both sides of the creek. Less than 3 miles away, in a hollow on the high prairie, a man and his wife were building a house. Their name was Scott, and Pa said they were nice folks. 6 miles beyond them, 2 bachelors were living in one house. They had taken 2 farms and built the house on the line between them. One man's bunk was against one wall and the other man's bunk against the other wall. So each man slept on his own farm, although they were in the same house, and the house was only 8 feet wide. They cooked and ate together in the middle of the house. Pa had not said anything about the wolves yet. Laura wished he would, but she knew that she must not interrupt when Pa was talking. He said that these bachelors did not know that anyone else was in the country. They had seen nobody but Indians, so they were glad to see Pa, and he stayed there longer than he meant to. Then he rode on, and from a little rise in the prairie, he saw a white speck down in the creek bottoms. He thought it was a covered wagon, and it was. When he came to it, he found a man and his wife and 5 children. They had come from Iowa, and they had camped in the bottoms because one of the horses was sick. The horse was better now, but the bad night air so near the creek had given them fever and ache. The man and his wife and the 3 oldest children were too sick to stand up. The little boy and the little girl, no bigger than Mary and Laura, were taking care of them. If your mom and your dad were sick, maybe you might have to take care of them. Wow. So Pa did what he could for them, and then he rode back to tell the bachelors about them. One of them rode right away to fetch that family up on the high prairie where they could soon get well in the good air. One thing led to another until Pa was starting home later than he meant. He took a shortcut across the prairie, and he was loping along on Patty, and suddenly, out of a little draw, came a pack of wolves. They were all around Pa in a moment. It was a big pack, Ma said. All of 50 wolves, and the biggest wolves I ever saw in my life. Must be what they call buffalo wolves. Their leader was a big gray brute. Stands 3 feet at the shoulder. If an inch, I tell you, my hair stood on end. And you didn't have your gun, said Ma. I thought of that, but my gun would have been no use if I'd had it. You can't fight 50 wolves with one gun, and Patty couldn't outrun them. What did you do, Ma asked. Nothing, said Pa. Patty tried to run. Never wanted anything worse than I wanted to get away from there, but I knew if Patty even started to run, those wolves would be on us in a minute, pulling us down. So I held Patty to a walk. Oh, goodness, Charles, Ma said under her breath. And we'll finish what happens tomorrow. Do you want to see a picture? Look at that. There is Pa, and he is surrounded by 50 wolves. And there's the big gray brute right in the front. Wow. So, stay tuned tomorrow. We'll find out what happens. Lots more to happen. Bye, boys and girls.